Heads and political junkies. It is I, editor-in-chief of Pot TV, Anil, Sthankiya, with my co-host today, Casey McFarlane. I'm going to start clicking on all the chats because I know there's people coming into the chat. Casey, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here. It's really awesome to be involved with this. I recently started a podcast. I think it was about a year ago. It's called The Consciousness Continuum, and we just talk about psychedelics and nature and the war on drugs and how pressing of an issue it is. And I think that it's an important topic that needs to be discussed, and it seems like a kind of a critical time to be talking about this because there's lots of things changing in the world, and it's important to talk about because it affects so many people. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. I have to say I really enjoyed. I've only seen one episode of The Consciousness Continuum and about a few minutes of another episode, and I really liked it. And then when I looked through some of the other guests you had, I was really excited to see more. So thank you for doing it. It seems like it's good stuff. Still just pulling up the chats. Let's see. People love watching someone click, but that weed, I should actually say, is from the Cannabis Substitution Project. So thank you to the good people there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of the organization and everything that they do.
Yeah, they're doing the heavy lifting that no one else seems to want to do right now.
I mean, there's a lot of people who are talking about cannabis as a harm reduction tool, but very few people are actually providing it. And they're providing it in a way that is as upfront and really relevant as possible. They're really doing it. So.
Totally. Yeah, their heart's in the right place, and they're making change. So
I could say hi to Josh White, Ocean Blue, Kent Brockman, Mary Anderson. Hello. Just saying hi to everybody in the chat. So maybe let's start talking about some consciousness news, or I didn't know how to quite describe the greater consciousness headlines or what that would be, but. That's your expertise. Maybe you can.
I don't know if I'm a consciousness expert.
I think I have consciousness.
I think I'm conscious. Yeah, what is consciousness anyways? Geez, that's a whole podcast on its own, I guess.
That would be. We'll have to find someone to enlighten us. What tracks it? Got a study here a story from Mugglehead. By the way, all of these stories are linked in the show notes, so if you want to read more about them, they're here. But reduced movement via smartphone data indicates cannabis intoxication with 90% accuracy. Now, I looked at the study, and I wouldn't say, 90% is a bit high for what they say is happening. Essentially, what they're saying is when people get high, they tend to move their phones less. So, but apparently, if you add that to the time of day when people typically consume cannabis, this is supposed to accurately guess when you're intoxicated by cannabis. But joke's on them, I'm always high. So.
Yeah, it's so strange, all the little weird studies they come out with, and we've been using this plant no doubt for a long time, and it hasn't been that long that the war on drugs has existed, has it?
Yeah, the war on drugs is far shorter than drugs themselves.
Right.
And it's certainly come up in waves. Current kind of think of Western-led, prohibition of the last 100 years, but of course, the opium wars before that and other regions and places. But these are all these prohibition rules are very strange. Like with any other plant and all the other plants, they don't even consider, being, psychedelic or poisonous. I went to a poisonous garden actually just this past weekend. It was herbology garden at UBC, and all
Cool.
the plants had different medical uses and stuff, and some were, only one of them was still considered an official drug, but some of them were like, it was like deadly nightshade, and like you can grow that. There's no no one says you can't grow nightshade. Crazy.
Yeah, I've got an article here. It says the obstacles to decriminalizing psychedelic drugs are political, not legal, say experts. That's from the Harvard Medical School. I think I would agree with that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I would certainly agree that the barriers are political, because the barrier to just having access to a rolled up tea bag, not overly complicated, I don't think.
The irony I find is that they go, it's for your health and safety, stay away, this dangerous demonic plant. But in reality, it's assisting you in getting well, So like that's a crime.
And even if it is a dangerous and demonic plant, I want the option to grow the devil in my garden. I feel like I should be able to have that option, Why can't you grow the devil in your backyard? I got this article here. Sheriff's office confiscated 770 pounds of marijuana with an estimated street value of $2 million. The Brevard County Sheriff's Office confiscated 770 pounds of pot, and they had a real cutesy Twitter post, come pick up your pot, because they don't know whose it is. They grabbed it and they don't even know whose it is.
Oh my
so
gosh.
I hope no one who is sick needed that. Yuck.
See, that's the thing that really gets me, is like, it could help so many people.
770 pounds of pot.
Yeah.
How much could that help? So does anyone in the chat want 770 pounds of pot? If I sent that to you, would that be helpful to you in any regards? Anyone here? Devil's lettuce is what Esley says. Yes, 770 pounds of the devil's own lettuce.
Yeah, so many people with seizures or who have cancer.
That's the thing that hurts me the most about the drug war, is the length of time that someone had not had access to something that could have helped them. So as it was prohibited, if you had not been able to have, you could have had decades of living your life with the seizures, a syndrome that gave you seizures for decades, and the idea that it was wellness was just right in your grasp, but didn't show up.
Yeah, this is an interesting article as well. Is mysticism becoming a problem for psychedelic medicine? That's from Forbes.
The epicenter of mystical studies, by the way.
Yeah.
sorry, please go ahead.
So true. So basically they're just saying like the risk of people imposing their own religious views, like therapists or people who are working with psychedelics, upon the clients that they're using. I thought that was kind of interesting.
No, I think that's very valid. I think a lot of the technologies behind even mildly psychedelic substances like cannabis, certainly to increasingly psychedelic substances. There's so much in the spirit realm, or realm that is outside your perception or usual awareness, that I think a lot of people, as things are opening up at the end of this kind of era of prohibition, people are just kind of throwing their own flavor into it, and I think maybe they've forgotten that there were approaches that were very long-standing and have been used in specific ways for everyone's safety, and now that people are just making it up, they may find themselves in some tricky paths.
And I think it relates a lot to kind of like big corporations and patenting, and like, sure, maybe it's good to patent something for a study. Like, I'm not denying the fact that patenting might be good, but maybe you shouldn't hoard it from everyone else. That's where it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Like, do what you will. Maybe you need it to quantify the amount of psilocybin in this, so you want to patent it and not have the natural mushroom. I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
Yeah.
But at the same time, don't make it so it's yours and no one else can access it.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about setting a marker with, say, a patent, for study, but then to use it in an exclusionary way, especially when they grow everywhere, when it's so easy for these medicines to occur in nature that got Susan Ward is saying MS, severe nerve damage and back pain. Sorry to hear. I hope you've found some relief, Susan. But there should be nothing stopping you from getting relief for that. That doesn't make any sense. Fortunately, hopefully this will help. This is another story from Mugglehead. Vancouver slashing annual cannabis license fees by 60% in 2022. So what really struck me out in this particular article, the fees are going down to between $13,000 and $15,000. There's also a one-time application fee and then a different license fee. But the annual fee in White Rock is $500 according to this article, whereas currently in the city of Vancouver it's $30,000.
Wow.
Why is there such a discrepancy? So they're saying $33,958 is what they're saying the cost is in Vancouver Court. I thought it was a little bit lower, but there may be some additional fees in there. But I don't understand why in the world that would be. They have a pet store is listed here, $256. A liquor store, $429. A standard just retail dealer, $155. But $33,000, almost $34,000 if you want to sell cannabis.
Right.
Like,
what is it?
And that's for legal cannabis, stuff I don't even want to smoke. Well, that's like maybe that stuff is dangerous. Maybe that should be high, but crazy. Speaking of the difference between the two, I got an article here from the CBC. Unregulated cannabis not as potent as advertised, says this study. Now, before I go into this, there was a study that was done by the New Brunswick Research and Productivity Council. I read the study itself, and I've linked to it in the notes. But I've also linked to something from the Pot TV archives, an episode of The Grow Show, hosted by Greg Williams, and it's called THC Percentages, Do They Add Up? And we broadcast this in 2008, and I believe, you can watch and judge yourself. I don't want to editorialize this too much, but I think if you watch that video, you can come away very easily with the perception that every single THC test that's ever been done on cannabis is wrong. Blatantly, obviously wrong. And the short version of that is, if the THC in cannabis only exists in the head of the trichome, and the THC by mass in a single trichome head is less than 1% mass, then how can a flower bud possibly be 10, 20, or 30% THC? It doesn't make any sense. It's almost like the people who rely on these studies don't really know or understand THC that well, but they just want to use it as a way to regulate it or limit it. They think they found something, and now it's like, twist that screw.
Yeah, I'm not going to say any names or anything, but my friends worked for a legal dispensary somewheres, and they pointed out a bunch of moldy weed, as one would, and they got fired.
Oh.
Right? So it's like, they're just, no one knows what they're doing, and money is the priority.
Yeah. This study also goes on. It says that illegal cannabis is unsafe because of harmful toxins. But if you read this study, the bacterial tests that they did not separate between beneficial and non-beneficial bacteria, and all the samples tested negative for E. coli or anything that would really hurt you. The only issue that I found with the study that would be a little bit concerning is there were more pesticides listed in the unlicensed cannabis than the licensed cannabis, but based on the tests, it seems like the same pesticides were used in 3 of the same samples, which leads me to believe they were all from the same place. So if you just have one person who unfortunately is using pesticides because they're so worried about losing money on the crop, that it's all coming from the same place. But once you just let people grow freely, I can't imagine this would be an issue. So yeah, the study's in there, but unfortunate. There's one here. This is from KTLA. Also, by the way, all of these studies and other news articles you can find at cannabisculture.com, so you should definitely check that out. You can also find the video versions of things at pot.tv. And if you're hungry along the way, you got to give thanks to Smoke and Snacks, but we'll talk about that later. So this is from KTLA. Oregon County declares emergency over illegal marijuana farms.
Wow.
So there's a county in Oregon, and they're saying a county in southern Oregon says it is so overwhelmed by an increase in the number and size of illegal marijuana farms that it declared a state of emergency Wednesday, appealing to the governor and legislature leaders for help.
Wow.
Just pull the kids out of school, close the blinds, lock the doors. I hope you've got canned food and shotgun shells. There's too many marijuana farms in the area. I don't mean to scare you, but
That was yesterday too.
I know. This is an emergency. This is an emergency.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy. But you know what is an emergency?
What?
It's 420.
Oh.
That's an emergency for me. So I'm gonna light up this joint. Please, if go ahead and light up as well if you're at home watching, and feel the emergency. Feel the emergency firsthand. The excuse for why people are being so horribly mistreated.
Mm-hmm. This is an interesting article.
Sorry, I was just going to say, speaking of mistreated, I guess because it's right in front of me, I'll say it, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
Young Brit, so this is from highandpolite.co.uk. Young Brit receives 25-year sentence in Dubai for CBD oil. This broke my heart. So what happened is, according to this guy, he went down to his car just to collect something. He had ordered food, it says, and then the police were there. They asked him about drugs. He didn't think he had any drugs, so he said, go ahead and search the car. But it looks like someone else, I think he was a coach on a sports team, had left some vials of CBD oil in the car. And so he was arrested for it. 25 years.
Oh my goodness.
In a Dubai prison.
That's heart-wrenching. Doesn't need to happen.
This breaks my heart. This really does. Like, this guy, and he was like, he had to sign a confession in his legal proceedings. He doesn't read Arabic, but that's it. That's what you get. So it's like, either sign this or you stay in detention indefinitely. Family's fighting to get him out. Like, this is, terrible. And all because of this lie. This lie that this is so dangerous and scary.
Wouldn't we want everyone feeling healthy and happy? Like, doing things they love? I know that sounds kind of like a crazy dream, but, then everyone's doing good things.
You need to do the things that you don't like because I want you to do them. You're not allowed to just do the things you like, even if those things may turn out to be great. They need to be good for me and me only. I did say I should state a bit of a correction. The red Congolese in here is from the Cannabis Substitution Project, but there is a lemon skunk. Very, very light on the lemon, but that is from another dispensary. So I did mix those two together.
Nice.
So, both of them illicit. Both of them. I made sure of that. But you were saying?
Yeah, I just find it interesting that we're at a point in time where, like, cannabis and it seems like psilocybin as well and other plants are being accepted, kind of, and the stigmas are, in a sense, being broken, I guess. There's still shitty legalization happening, but it feels like there's something going on.
Oh yeah,
sure.
yeah. No, I think definitely. I think even though the labels and the kind of logic they're trying to apply is, this cannabis is illicit and this cannabis is illicit, as soon as you're staring at the nug in front of you or you see them side by side, like the game is up. I don't think. I think people are savvy enough to see that. Oh, this is not. This
Seems
is
like they're losing their grip, so they're trying really hard.
Yeah,
to
they're
spook
really
people.
trying to hang on to the last.
They're trying to
Yeah.
fill people with fear, but like they're not winning. I don't think they're just trying to. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope not. I don't think that's the case. I don't think they're winning. I mean, maybe I would say.
I'm not an expert, so I don't know, but maybe I'm naive and
Just
optimistic.
your thoughts. That's okay. You're allowed to
Totally.
have your opinion.
Oh,
I was gonna, yeah. In terms of that, I would say that maybe some of them are starting to realize the jig is up, so they're all jockeying for position. And the
Yeah.
thing about it is, a lot of these prohibitionists, they're not going to get, maybe they hope that, I'll also get rich like some other cop who now owns a weed store, but maybe not. Maybe he was in first, and now you're getting nothing. So, I hope they wise up sooner than later.
Me too, yeah. I think it comes from the public being educated and, making a decision for themselves. Because then, there's really no other option, and hopefully they get inspired and make different changes.
Yeah, I would hope so. And I think it's just I think everyone in the public understands a fair comparison. As much as people like to, belittle, people don't do what I want them to do, so everything's bad. But, excuse me, I think that people are, if you just put any psychedelic experience or any drug that you could possibly take against horseback riding, you know what the risk is. Against riding a bicycle, against skydiving, against any other activity that you could be doing. Yes, it may require certain preparation or skill. You want to maybe deal with someone who has expertise or interest, or maybe you could go in cold. But there's a certain amount of inherent risk, and maybe people are getting to a state where they're finding a safer way to be risky with their consciousness. I think maybe video games have helped that, in that everyone's used to being 50 million different avatars. Like if you've ever put on 3D goggles, the Oculus Rift, the headsets, that's intense. That's way the joint. I can set this down anytime I want. That headset is you're strapped in. To me, that's way more psychedelic.
Virtual reality?
Yeah, that's way more psychedelic.
Psychedelics and virtual reality.
I think virtual reality is maybe the other comparison to get people over the idea of the psychedelic.
Perhaps, yeah.
Perhaps.
We're connected to technology at the moment.
In that way, yeah. And
a lot of people like to play video games, and this article, the therapeutic potential of psilocybin. So right now, I think there was a ban on it for a while, unless you were a research company with a bunch of money to research it. No one really had access to come out with studies. They're just doing that now, and all this fantastic research is coming out.
Yeah, I heard someone from MAPS discussing about how to even get certain research chemicals, you need to be able to research what you make the research chemicals out of, and they have to be to a standard. So even if those are blocked, so just to get something close to psilocybin, it's such where do these mushrooms come from, and what can they be, and what are you growing them with, and are you even allowed to have that? So speaking of research and safety, so I got 2 studies here, and I pulled these up because these came out a day of each other. One of them is from Global News, the other is from Normal. So you'd be saying the potheads are biased, but I did link to the actual study itself. You can take a look at it. Cannabis researchers examined the impact of cannabis on developing brains. And so it's another one of these stories where the concern is that cannabis makes you stupid or crazy if you're a kid, and your brain stops developing when you're 25. And that's the reason. You couldn't explain to young people that if a church or state doesn't control a medicine, psychedelic experience or pleasure, that they get upset because it gives you a direct conduit. No, you want to say to kids, this stuff is damaging to your brain. But the other article was twin study, adolescent cannabis exposure, not an independent cause of psychosis in adulthood. And these studies came out within a day of each other. The actual studies themselves came out slightly further, but the articles came out a day apart. And so we've had this stuff for thousands of years. Like, I don't know why these are the excuses, and it bugs me because I think there's a lot of legitimate study that unfortunately isn't being done in areas, and it's all because everyone can only find money to get prohibition related studies.
It's so backwards, It's almost, it reminds me of like swimming against a really quite strong current, It's like, geez, so much time and money and energy and hardship, suffering, dying, all sorts of things is happening.
So unnecessary.
Really unnecessary. Yeah. Everyone else's life would probably just get better and more abundant if we didn't do that, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Let's give that a try. One of these good studies, actually, I just wanted to mention just in brief, plant-derived trans-beta caryophyllene boosts glucose metabolism and ATP synthesis in skeletal muscle cells through cannabinoid type 2 receptor stimulation. So if you're currently using cannabis as a means of health to treat or prevent diabetes, I would recommend giving this a look. Specifically CB2 receptors, it's too early to say anything super definitive, but very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Is there anything else you wanted to?
I guess now, this was posted just a couple days ago, actually. And you can now consume, cultivate non-commercial psychedelics without arrest in Seattle. So they say. I wonder what the ins and outs are with that. I'm not really too sure, but it seems like it's not much of a priority anymore.
Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope so.
I would hope so too.
Yeah, I don't see the immediate victim. I don't see the harm, because if it turned out someone was just recklessly operating a kitchen and seems like when there's a salmonella outbreak, it's pretty quick to get identified. So what's the harm in someone just wanting to grow and experience fungus or plants or any other living thing? Don't you get a peaceful symbiosis of indigenous existence?
Yeah. This is kind of...
That's right. That sounds like peaceful symbiosis. Yeah.
There's this thing that we don't have to talk about for long, but I do want to mention because I think it's awful.
Please do.
I think it was just yesterday or the day before. New Brunswick is where I'm from. The government told all their employees that they weren't allowed I think they would get fired if they did mention that it was unceded, unsurrendered indigenous territory.
If they mention that?
Yeah, they said maybe there's, they said they started it by saying maybe there's an instance where that would be necessary, and if so, this is what you are allowed to say.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
I was just like, oh my
bet.
goodness.
I'd love to, if you send me a link to that, I'll include it in the show notes.
Definitely, yeah. It makes me angry.
I think there's, in that, is the acknowledgement. Once it's directly in front of your face and you see and you acknowledge no harm, that's a real admission. So every government doing that, because I mean, as far as I know, I'm not an expert, but it seems like the treaties have not been upheld, and the whole deal was, I mean, even before that even existed, I think, the insanity of what's happened to an indigenous existence here in this country and elsewhere. It goes without saying, but yeah, the acknowledgement I think is very telling.
Definitely.
Because to me, the acknowledgement, it's important to acknowledge it. But once you've acknowledged it, then what? How does that frame what's going on? So anything else you want to discuss? I just had 2 more stories that really...
That was the end of my article.
Well, excellent. Let me talk about this one. This one, in terms of the penalty, the stigma, this is from Global News, and the headline is, Private Okanagan Cannabis Retailers Demand Crackdown on Unlicensed Shops. So the Okanagan Cannabis Collective, which represents approximately 20 cannabis stores in the Okanagan, has released an open letter going as far as calling BC's Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General Mike Farnsworth, responsible for the enforcement of BC's cannabis laws, to resign. Now, I've not been a big fan of Mike Farnsworth, and I don't entirely have an issue with that. But what bugged me here was the quote, while it is said that eliminating the illegal market is your government's #1 mandate, it would appear that your government is more interested in undercutting private legal retail cannabis stores through your taxpayer-subsidized operation than achieving this goal through actual enforcement measures. Now, I don't doubt that cannabis retailers are being taxed unfairly. I think 100%. But the answer to that is not so-called enforcement measures. And what was called for was to close down illicit cannabis shops. And I mean, I have video of one. This is from something I've left a link, also from Global News. Let's just watch this, and then we'll talk about it in a second.
Don't touch me! Emotions running high inside the dispensary. The Grey Market pot shop on Thurlow was raided Wednesday morning. Every gram of product on the shelves seized. Dana Larson, who owns the shop, says this is not serving the public's needs.
This was not a priority for them, and that if you were in compliance with city bylaws, you were going to be left alone as long as you were making a good faith effort to go into the legal system.
While the cops were bagging and boxing, outside customers continued to try the door. A steady stream of medical patients and seniors baffled that their local dispensary was out of business.
Right now, because I don't have my medicine, I'm very sick and shaken here. It's not right. I'm a resident of Canada. I'm 69 years old with cancer. Why can't I come to a nice place and buy my weed?
While protesters were blaming the VPD for the raid, spokespeople say the department only assisting the Community Safety Unit, a provincial government agency tasked with upholding the new laws around cannabis. According to the Minister of Public Safety, the Grey Market operators were given plenty of notice.
I think the Community Safety Unit, at last count, I think there's been about 50 some odd illegal operations that have either shut down voluntarily or have had their product and the cash confiscated.
While Larson is operating outside the legal framework, he is in the process of applying for a license. In the meantime, he says this store, with a loyal customer base, will reopen. Aaron MacArthur, Global News.
Wow.
When was that?
Now, that was from 2019.
Oh, okay.
But there was a shop that was raided about 6 weeks ago within 15 minutes of where I'm sitting. So, and I'm sure there was somebody who relied on that dispensary for medicine. Now, the other thing that, I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, even though this is, I really feel like I shouldn't have to explain why someone still connected to their medical equipment, like an IV tree. I know I'm not a nurse. I don't know what it is. Unable to get medicine because the government stole it, and this person is crying about how these places need to be closed. These people don't sell what's in that store anyway. Mm-hmm. They don't sell high dose edibles. They don't. There's a particular type of flower or extract produced in a certain way, and that works for you, why in the world should anyone be prevented from having what works for them? Mm-hmm. Especially when it's so safe. And crack down on unlicensed pot shops. Anyone from this cannabis collective, please, let's talk about it live. Mm-hmm. I don't really even want to. I don't want to have that discussion. But please come down and explain if this is what you want. And if this is not what you meant, what are you doing to make sure that gets fixed? Because all of those stores came at the expense of all the stores that were providing medicine before this. Mm-hmm. I've worked in them. Clients. Yeah, I have definitely seen looks like miracles firsthand. It makes me so upset. I should not have to say it.
Well,
that's the news. No, that's not. That's there's also this, and I don't want to cut you off. So this is we'll watch this as well, and then maybe this will provide a little more context overall.
Mm-hmm. The doors may be open at this cannabis shop, but it wasn't easy getting there. Every time Charles Verabioff pursued a business banking account, he heard the same response.
Oh, I tried every single one of them, and every one was no, 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 no.
He tried the Big Five. The reason why he was rejected wasn't always clear, but some branch managers told him the cannabis industry was just too risky.
high risk. It's no more high risk than a casino or a bar or a restaurant. We're legal, licensed, regulated by the city and the government.
And Verabioff isn't alone. The Association of Canadian Cannabis Retailers says 50 of its 52 BC members were all turned away by big banks.
We're talking about very, very basic financial services like a checking account. So my members are still struggling, 3 years post cannabis legalization in Canada.
She says it's putting a burden on small business owners, forced to dig deep into savings. As well, it creates logistical challenges for businesses who want to expand nationally, as credit unions are localized. So why are traditional banks freezing out cannabis retailers?
I think that, we can't underestimate the impact of the stigma. I mean, we're talking about 80 plus years of prohibitionist rhetoric that has been, very prominent in society.
Many of Canada's national banks also operate internationally. And while selling cannabis is legal here, this isn't the case in most countries. Experts believe that stigma, especially when it comes to international markets, has forced many Canadian banks to steer clear.
The banks are afraid of the extraterritorial reach of US laws, and that makes this harder for them.
With banks backing out, many cannabis retailers have turned to credit unions. Schilling says cannabis is an emerging industry with high regulatory oversight. He predicts big banks might see it as more work than it's worth. Prohibition still casts a shadow, but Schilling says that fear is misplaced.
If you wanted to launder money, which is probably the key concern, you could do that through a florist or a bakery. Actually, the last place I would do it was through a cannabis retailer because that's what everyone's looking at.
Back at the shop, Verabioff is hopeful big banks will eventually come around.
Canadian banking needs to get on board with this industry.
An industry he says has huge economic potential. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
The CSP cannot get a bank account. There's no harm in what they're doing. What they're doing is a clear and obvious good. If you don't know about the Cannabis Substitution Project, it's a program in the downtown east side, and they give away, they provide no cost and low cost to subsidize the no cost cannabis in different forms to get people off deadlier drugs and to get them through the withdrawal period. And it's a beautiful project, and they can't get a bank account. Legal stores can't get a bank account, not with big banks. Interesting. So the country decides to make weed legal, but it doesn't even have a bank that is nationally connected enough that it can facilitate the laws that it passes. If U.S. banks don't want to do it, well, sorry, you just can't have it, even though you passed the law. Well, then who writes the law? If only the bankers get to decide. I don't know. Sorry, it makes me insane.
Well, it's just quite, yeah, it's not necessary. And there's a lot of harm that happens because of it. So, yeah. Yeah,
and also because, some people I think want to buy cannabis in a store like that. That seems perfectly nice, and those boxes, like everything, the layout, like I would totally be into it if no one was being kicked on the other end. Then I'd be into it. But the pot without the piece, it was the piece and pot that I was interested in, and the two definitely seem connected because it's peaceful. So so that guy should be able to operate his store the way he wants, but also should be able to grow freely.
It should
plants.
be, I think,
herbal medical autonomy.
I think there's some interesting work happening in this field at the moment too, and that's nice to remember. How awful the drug war is, but also, some progress is being made anyway.
Progress has definitely been made, and I will say, the cannabis possession isn't nearly as big an issue. Possession arrests have gone way down, so we've made amazing success. But coming up on the 18th is the 3-year anniversary of cannabis legalization in Canada, and I think now more than ever is the time to do it right. This is the time to fix those issues. It's clear what they are, and what a success story. What an incredible example we could be to everyone on the planet. I think at a time, maybe it seems like where there is I see a strong line of narrative of of stress and division between people. What a time to get people to expand and reconsider things, especially at a time when new solutions seem to be the most sought after.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's I think that's about that. Those are some drug war headlines. There's plenty more. You can find them at cannabisculture.com. Over 25 years of incredible cannabis information to give you context. Because there's a lot of new articles, but they miss, again, like if you watch this video from that Greg made, THC percentages, do they add up? Watch that and tell me any THC test that's ever been printed makes sense. That makes 99% of them bunk. 1% of them are probably kind of okay because they're, yeah, what I mean, and that video you can find at pot.tv. So check that out. And smoking snacks. If you like snacks, you should check this out. I'm gonna grab one of these. They change every month, but if you like flavors, dangerous grown-up flavors like refined white sugar, dangerous. No, there's no danger in here. There's no weed, but there's also shirts and glass, and all the candies are exotic. They're like one-off, you know, fancy sugar terps, so to speak. Weird collabs. Definitely heady. So many things in here. I won't even go through them all because I'll show off such a nice box in a nicer way later. But definitely check out Smoking Snacks. I don't ever do that on the news. The news. I love the convention of news, but what it's become and sometimes how silly it is. And there's good reporting. Like we saw some nice stuff there. It seems like there's a lot of great people doing some things, but there's someone's stepping in the way. So if the news can't be this honest, then like what are we talking?
What is
what's
news
the truth?
anyways?
Like, what's the information?
Yeah.
I say, I don't know. What is the news? There you go. What is the news? Psychedelics. That is the news for illicit cannabis. Like, I'm not even sure I'm supposed to say this, but a fella who won very recently, I think 2 or 3 cannabis cups, which, you know, some people they say they're frivolous, but I say if a lot of people are smoking a bunch of weed and they all come back generally liking something, yeah, I think a cannabis cup really does tell you something about it. But he is one of the people who helps Neil's project, because it's all run on donations, and yeah, cup winning cannabis, and he's giving it away for free. So what is the
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt. I could go on forever, but if you want to know more, Pot TV. So thank you very much. Let me just take a look at the chat. I apologize for not talking to the chat. Thank you, Don Hayes. Yeah, I love Hayes. Bingo Lombardi, 420. Wild Dragon. This is the longest name. I'm not even going to try to read it. Cliff Timothy Flowers. Nice. Well, that's it. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think that just about wraps it up. Thank you for the opportunity, and
thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening.
Take a look at the Consciousness Continuum.
I have a YouTube channel. It's also on Facebook, but most of my videos are on YouTube at the moment. It's called the Consciousness Continuum, and we just talk about mostly psychedelics, and sometimes like science, and sometimes different like religious type, like the line between science and spirituality, kind of, and psychedelics. So yeah, you could tune into that and listen if you'd like, and yeah, it might be interesting for you.
Yeah, it sounds like an expanded worldview. I saw you had an interview with the artist Chris Dyer. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Yeah, I was excited to see that as well. Haven't looked at it yet though, but we'll say fare thee well. So, drug peace.
Hello there, first-time viewers. Welcome to Pot TV. Welcome to Pot TV.
Let them go! Let them go! Let them go! Let them go! Let them go!
only now, once we've reached this point of critical mass, that I could really tell you the story, because that's the interactive nature of the internet.
Pod TV is an internet video-based site. We've had over 6 million shows watched. We get about 10,000 shows watched a day. Shows on growing marijuana, medical marijuana, politics of marijuana.
And at that time, most magazines or books revolving around marijuana were prohibited literature.
From cookbooks to grow books, books about the cannabis culture, mushroom books, even psychedelic books.
The mass injustice being done where millions of people in this country are being scapegoated, having their rights and their property and their leisure time and their privacy and their freedom of movement all stripped away from them.
And they pulled me off the line, they pushed me down and put me in handcuffs, and they locked me in the patio.
This is what it's all about. A little green plant. You, the taxpayers, are being asked to subsidize a war on a little green plant.
I know it's scary and difficult and frustrating, and politicians are a fraud. Try and change that and be a voice of truth.
For many, many years, decades.
In 2001, Canada legalized marijuana for medical purposes.
Pod TV news flash breaking story, July 9th, 2003.
I became leader about 9 months ago.
You have how many locations and how long have you been serving the people of the community for?
Well, I started in 2004.
Because as long as you're not hurting anyone else, as long as you're not causing any harm, then why should you be dealing with police or prisons or agents of the government?
A former DEA agent and author of Powder Burns, Cocaine Contras and the Drug War.
In the media often, and the media reports uncritically all too often.
I saw this video and I was like, whoa, man, seems like there's something to this.
Join me weekdays on Pot TV.
We're going to be doing a new show here on Pot TV.
On Pot TV, Your Bar combines poetry, music, art, video clips, and photographs with a variety of interesting guests who are involved in the medical cannabis movement.
It comes on air at 4:20.
Cannabis indica, or Indian hemp. It was tasted by the priests on sacrificial occasions.
So I'm gonna stop and smoke a joint. Just figured I'd show you my surroundings here. Beautiful, beautiful little flowers everywhere.
Hemp and its many applications, how hemp can be made into paper and fuel and clothing and that.
2 different samples.
Now these are the same cut, grown in the same room with 2 different soil mixes.
As a line diagram, okay, and this is a cross-section of a bract.
Now on some of these plants too, there's something called pre-flowers that form. Sometimes 8 to 12 weeks into the veg cycle, you can look 3 or 4 sets of branches down from the top. Hey, wait a second, I'm not even smoking joints. I'm talking.
We need real cannabis dispensaries. Many patients who use cannabis as a medicine need access. You're taking the medicine away from sick and dying people.
Let's overgrow the government. Let's have more marijuana than they can ever stop.
But while you sit here enjoying this, remember those who are in prison this moment, locked away from their loved ones, locked away from their friends, and that could be you.
Just want to say thanks for watching Pot TV. You can't get higher on the net.
All right, welcome to the THC show with Neil, where we talk about the unpleasant truths of our system and our democracy here.
I help patients. I
know what you're saying.
I got raided for growing, and I'm staring at the cracks in the wall doing time, and I'm trying to figure out who I hurt. No victim, no crime.
And we look for avenues of hope and ways that we can change some things. As you can see, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of care packs that we're handing out there. I am not a criminal.
Wow, look at this. Right, here we go. It's 420 for sure now. Got you.
And I'll be back next Tuesday for another episode of THC, Truth, Hope, and Change. Go about changing the world as best you can, and while you're doing it, just have as much fun as you can. Thank you.